But you also did a deep dive into nicotine.
Yes.
Which is far more controversial for obvious reasons. What did you come out learning about nicotine after your experience in residency?
Yeah, this was, something I just stumbled upon in the literature. I wanted to find all sorts of ways that I can improve cognition, learning, attention while sleep deprived. Didn't want to take stimulants. What I'll say is exercise is probably the best thing you can do under sleep deprived states.
Yeah.
Nicotine, I stumbled across a few very interesting studies, and it's more recently been talked about in its non-smoked forms.
Yes.
So just as a caveat, no one should ever smoke any form of nicotine. Don't vape, don't smoke cigarettes, nothing. I'm talking about patch or gum.
Right.
So I found a few...
Ladies. As an example.
Yes, exactly. So...
Careful one?
Sure. Yeah.
Pomegranate, mint?
I'll do mint.
Oh, I'll do pomegranate.
How many 4 milligrams? Wow, that's I have 2 milligrams. I'm going to take... Yeah. Oh, yeah. Do they? You can cut them. Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. Right. So that's something we'll talk about too. So these are 4 milligrams of nicotine. Might be too much for some people. Not enough for some people.
Yeah.
Right. So don't vape, don't smoke.
Don't vape, don't smoke.
Don't pass anything through your lungs as a respirologist.
Exactly.
Right.
So we know from, recent meta-analyses and looking at, a lot of small studies that nicotine is a stimulant. There's nicotinic acetylcholine receptors all throughout the brain. Probably the reason smokers, have a really hard time quitting and love smoking is because, nicotine binds to these receptors and triggers a cascade of these neurochemicals.
Excitatory effects.
Exactly. Dopamine, serotonin,
GABA,
norepinephrine.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people have been talking, on social media about how it's cognitively enhancing.
Yes.
And so when you look at the meta-analyses, there does seem to be a bit of a consistent effect on improving attention. And when you dive a little bit deeper with respect to sleep deprivation, we don't have any human studies, right? So this was just something I experimented on my own based on mechanistic data and animal studies. Mm-hmm. So knowing that nicotine is a bit cognitively enhancing, seems to improve attention, some researchers did a few studies on some mice where they sleep deprived mice and then they gave them nicotine to see what would happen. In one study, it was a study where they were just measuring levels of chemicals in the brain, BDNF, which a lot of people call miracle crow for the brain, helps improve neurogenesis, supports neurons, dropped quite significantly with sleep deprivation, 24, 36 hours. They gave these mice nicotine and it actually improved quite a bit. So then the next logical study was they took mice, they sleep deprived them for 48 hours, I believe. And then they gave them all sorts of tests. Or it was a maze test where they were testing how fast mice learn and how many mistakes they were making. Sleep deprive these mice for 48 hours. They're making several mistakes. I think they were making up to 4 on near the end, but they gave them nicotine and they reverted almost back to normal. All the learning deficits caused by sleep deprivation were reversed. And I thought that was really fascinating. And then I found a quite detailed but beautifully written mechanistic review talking about all the potential mechanisms that nicotine could reverse the negative effects of sleep deprivation. I'm not a neuroscientist. I don't understand all of the receptors, but it was a very well written piece. And those studies all together, I weighed the risks and benefits. Definitely did not want to smoke it, but I started taking small doses, 2 milligrams, occasionally overnight, and my own experience
as you're working,
as I'm working.
Shift, right?
Yeah.
Not while you're sleeping.
No. 2 a.m., I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
Take 2 milligrams of nicotine. And, this is probably potentially a lot of placebo, but what I will say is my fatigue just melted away in a lot of circumstances. It was quite fantastic.
Had you ever smoked before?
No, okay. Never. A couple of cigars, I guess, university and stuff, but no regular nicotine. And, to be honest, I'm I have a respect and a fear for nicotine, right? I see people that smoke every day that cannot stop smoking, no matter what they do, how habits they change, medications they try. Very habit forming.
So is it that? So this is sort of a controversial question, or an important question: is nicotine itself addictive?
Yes,
it is. It is addictive. In addition to all the other stuff that they put into cigarettes or into vapes, it doesn't make it any better. But nicotine itself is addictive.
Yes. Okay. At least there's a very strong risk of it.
Right.
So, I would say I have a respect for it. I don't do it every day. I do it occasionally. I'll do, the lowest possible dose, like 2 milligram gum when I need it.
Right.
2-3 times a week, max. But I notice overnight, I get a really big boost in, attention, even recovering from 26-hour calls, sleeping for a few hours, waking up, needing to get some work done, and taking a bit. I feel quite a lot better. It's quite substantial.
So nicotine is considered a nootropic. This is a term that gets tossed around, I think, a little too loosely. Can you define that for us?
Essentially, I think most people consider nootropics any chemical that you take that seems to improve some domain of cognition.
Right.
So with respect to nicotine, we've seen a lot of trials, a consistent effect in improving attention, at least.
Is there anybody who should not be taking nicotine? We'll talk about in terms of gum or mints.
Yeah. Nicotine, it's at the point now where I wouldn't recommend anyone, start taking nicotine based off the studies, right? This is something that I wanted to experiment with to see how I felt. And this is just my experience I'm talking about. There are concerns with, it's a stimulant, right? You get a bit of release of norepinephrine, adrenaline, right? If I inject someone with adrenaline, their heart rate's going to go up, their blood pressure is going to go up. So definitely, if you have high blood pressure, stay away from nicotine. Addictive personalities.
Sure.
I do wonder, a lot of people are vaping a lot. And actually, it was funny because a lot of my surgical colleagues overnight were telling me that they vape because they notice that it really wakes them up and keeps them going.
Right.
I've tried to convince them to use gum instead, but it's one of those things where it is highly addictive. So I wouldn't say anyone should take it. It's one of those things, if you're going to experiment with it, if you have medical issues, certainly talk to your doctor. But with everything we do, there's a risk, right? I've tolerated it quite well. I've noticed a lot of benefits, but that's just me. And I don't feel comfortable enough speaking to how other people will do, because there's not really much literature on it.
Right. So you're pretty public with what you've been doing. You beautifully outline it and sort of archive it on your X page. What do your colleagues, your fellow students think about what you're doing?
I would say half of them find it very interesting.
Yeah.
Right. Because, this is how we advance science.
Right.
Right. You walk into residency, you're supposed to stay awake for 26, 30 hours and just suck it up. Right. And I think we really need to change the tide and be more inquisitive. What can we do to make ourselves, smarter, learn more, be able to, make less mistakes? And a lot of them find it pretty interesting, actually. I've convinced a lot of friends to start taking creatine, especially for overnight shifts. Nicotine, it's very demonized, right? Everyone thinks of smoking. Everyone thinks of cancer. So, it's one of those things I don't really recommend to other people or colleagues, but they do find the science quite fascinating. And, my hope is that we can start to do bigger trials on it. I would love to see a trial of nicotine in sleep-deprived adults.
What is interesting is that tides changed so many times. I mean, there was a time when doctors would prescribe or suggest Marlboros.
Yeah.
That obviously went away for good reason.
Exactly.
We might see a time where nicotine becomes a little bit more, it's becoming more accepted for sure. But in terms of the medical world.